Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Today I went out and brought the brand new Fiscus X32. Now this one here is the X27. The X32 is fifth generation of the Fiscus splitting axe. The one at the back, I don't know, it doesn't even have an X number on it, but from looking and comparing it to the handle length and everything else, it looks like an X21, and it's about 20 years old. As you can see that the case that it comes in is very old style, and its wedge shape looks different than that shape. So I guess the thing is, with the fifth generation, they changed the wedge shape. So we can go over of what they've changed. And I was using one last week. I was at a friend's place, so I know exactly how they compare. The X27 is no different than the X25, except the handle is longer. So if you actually have a look at these two here, you can see that the handle on the X27 is longer by a little bit. So that's the difference between the X25 and the X27. Same head weight, handle's a bit different. You can get X36, which is the same length as the Fiscus X27. So I went down to the local Bunnings hardware store, and they've replaced all of the old stock is gone, and they're all in with the new stock. So I got online and I had a good look at all the reviews and everything else and all the hoo-ha, and it's going to be interesting what I tell you, what I think of it. So we'll actually take them out of the jackets, out of their holders, and we can sort of see whether we can, you can see how it's actually wider by about 10 millimeters. So we'll put that up. See whether you can actually see this. We'll sort of zoom in there a little bit closer. I want you to pay, yeah, it's a little bit difficult to see, but you can see the difference in the width of the wedge, and I've got a vernier here, so if we measure the width of this at the edge, that's what we've got, 86.83. So let's just say 87 mil versus 78. You could almost say 79. So yeah, 79 versus 86. So yeah, it's wider. The other thing that's interesting, if you look at the wedge, the length of the wedge is different as well. So the length of this wedge here, we'll just sort of put that back on. I notice that the wedge is smaller, so there's a few differences there. Yep, do that again. I was actually hitting the button accidentally and turning it off. We've got 87 on the wedge. This wedge is significantly smaller by look. Well over 10 mil. So the wedge length is 74. So yeah, a good 10 mil there. 74 versus 87, 13 millimeters. And you'll notice that all as they've done, they've stepped this out. They call it L shape or something like that there. Looks like a bit of an L. So you've got that difference there as well. So the wedge has changed its shape. Then the other thing that's interesting, when you look at the X27, all the Fiscus axes, we'll just see whether you can see that here. this wedge shape here is 25 degrees, and you can just see that edge there. That's where it was ground, and that's a 30-degree bevel on it. You can see that there. So that's the 30-degree bevel. And they traditionally had that for the last 20 years that I know of. Now, what have they done here? There is no bevel. They've actually got this at 30 degrees all the way till it comes to a point. That little black mark there is where I just ran it through the sharpener. It's razor sharp. You cut yourself on it. So it is a 30-degree wedge. The wedge is fatter. If we put them up against each other, you'll be able to see the difference, hopefully. A little bit difficult to see, but you can see the length. It's totally different style. This is 30-degree wedge, this is 25. So this is the X32 and this is the X27. So which one's better? That's the conclusion, isn't it? Which one is better? Well, I'm sorry to say that I really couldn't pick the difference. Now, when I say that, it depends what wood that you're cutting. Some wood it will work better in, and other wood that it won't. I don't think it's going to make virtually any difference whatsoever in our Australian hardwood. It may make some difference in softwood, but honestly, I couldn't pick it, really. Yeah, if I had a blindfold on and they put it in my hand and they took the blindfold up and I raised the axe up in the air so I couldn't see which one I was using, and I split the timber and then I closed my eyes, and I'd done that a few times, then they swapped over and they said which one worked better, I wouldn't be able to pick it, because you've got variations in the timber that you split. You could have a slight knot, the grain structure could be slightly different, the density will be different. One thing about Australian hardwood, it's very dense. An example would be some of the hardwood, you could have 1.2 cubic meters per ton. That's the density of it. Whereas if you had pine, you would need 1.5 cubic meters a ton or something like that, because it's very light. Don't have the actual figures on pine, but it's not very dense compared to Australian hardwood. So for me, there may be a difference in this one in certain types of timber. And unfortunately, when you buy a splitting axe or a splitting maul, they really don't say, hey, this is suited in soft to medium timber, or hey, this is suited in hardwood. So that's those two there. And a couple of days ago, I brought the Stihl AX20PC, which has a polyamide handle on it. Very, very similar. But its wedge shape is almost identical to the old school Fiscus. You got 30 degrees, sorry, you got 25 degrees here, and you've got 30 degrees on the wedge. Now, one thing that I'll always say about the Fiskars is that the edges on them, every single one that I've seen, and I've seen about that many of them, the precision that they're ground is second to none. They really are fantastic at their high quality. And I was a little bit surprised, if we look at the Stihl, and you look at that side, and you turn it over, can you see how much wider this is? So it wasn't even ground identical on the left side or the right side. So you can see how this is much skinnier. Yeah, a little, and even the edge there, it looks like there's a little bit of a bump, or yeah, it's not precision like the Fiscus, even though that the metal, it's C60 metal, so it's very high quality metal, but the precision's not there. But nonetheless, that's not going to affect its cutting performance. But this was $205 Australia, right? So I expect the quality, and that includes the ground beveled edge, when you're paying up to $205 to $139. And this has more precision in it on the edge than this. So it says made in Germany, but they didn't really pay attention to the edge as they should. This is one of the biggest problems that I see in all splitting axes and mauls, that at the factory they don't pay enough attention to the precision of the edge, whereas Fiscus can't even knock it. This one here at the back, this old one, it's about 20 years old. It's the same thing. It's always attention to detail, and the beveled edge is the same on both sides. Now, the other thing that's interesting, isn't this interesting? We talk about the 5th generation, but have a look. This is the same width. So, exactly the same width. So the only thing that's different between this one and that one is that this is 25-degree wedge and that's a 30-degree wedge. So they've gone back to the longer length. Anyway, the thing is, the end conclusion is this works just as good as this, or this works just as good as that. I can't pick the difference because every time that you strike a bit of timber, you might put a little bit more energy into it, or the density from one log could be slightly different to another log. When I was using this the other day, I went back to the X25 because my friend's got the X25, so it's the same size handle. I can't pick the difference. Not in the hardwood that I was splitting. So, yeah, look, if you're thinking of getting the X25 or the X32, I guess this probably does work better because unless it's just a marketing thing, yeah. I don't know, but I can't pick the difference. So, yeah, if I could really pick the difference, I own just about every Fiscus that was ever made except for the new generation. I won't be buying any more of the new generation because isn't it interesting how they've gone back to the wider wedge that they had 20 years ago. Anyway, that's my take on it. As I said, this one here, the still, the only thing that I would say about it, they could have put more attention to detail, and when they ground the angle, it's ground one side more than the other side. Not that it's going to change any cutting performance, it's razor sharp, but because you're paying 30% more, it should have had a better ground edge on it, more precision. It hasn't. That's the only thing I can criticise on it. It's only a small criticism, but nonetheless, when you're paying more money for something, and as I said, this is the biggest mistake that I ever see in all the splitting axes and the splitting wedges by all manufacturers. They don't pay enough attention to detail to the edges that they're grinding or the beveled angle, except for Fiscus. I have never seen a mistake on a Fiscus yet, and I probably never will, except for their splitting maul, the ISO Core Pro. It had the wrong angle for Australian conditions hardwood. It was more like 60 degrees. I brought it back to about 40, about 45 degrees. It splits harder wood. For Australian timber, if you're using a splitting axe, it is really good that if you've got a beveled edge of about 30 degrees, 30 to 40 degrees, and for a splitting axe, anywhere from about 40 to about, look, I don't like to go much more than about 40, 45 degrees, but I will go up to 60, but it certainly splits the wood open better with a lesser angle in Australian hardwood. For wood that's overseas, it's a lot softer. That's a different story. They can, it's not as critical. So it is critical here in Australia because of the wood is so dense and so hard that you have the right angle, and that angle is exactly what the Fiscus is. And you go into every hardware store here in Australia, you're going to find the Fiscus range there because they're so popular and they work so good here in Australia. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.